Hello and welcome to another conversation with the Middle East Monitor. My name is Nassim Ahmed and I will be your host for today's discussion. A new analysis by a UK human rights group, Cage International, has revealed an alarming increase in the number of pro-Palestine activists who are being cracked down on by members of the British establishment and schools and colleges and universities. Cage International, which was set up in 2003 at the height of the war on terror, it notes a 455% increase in the number of cases that it's handling since the last upsurge in 2021. So I have with me the head of policy from Cage to discuss the report, but also to discuss Cage as an organization. As I mentioned, it's celebrating its 20th anniversary this week. And Cage has announced it's going to be going international. So I want to discuss with them their work, the 20-year legacy, their key accomplishments, and how generally their work is continuing with detainees in Guantanamo Bay. And I have with me Anas Mustapha. He is the head of Public Advocacy at Cage UK. He guides media strategy and various other research projects within the organization. He is also a speaker and advocate against the abuse of state power, and specialising across the breadth of UK Counter Terrorism. Anas holds a degree in English language, is a native speaker, of course, and a student of Islamic sciences. Anas, thank you for giving us your time and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for hosting me.
So let's begin with what I mentioned earlier, that Cage is celebrating its 20-year anniversary. It came out of the hostile atmosphere that was created during the height of the war on terror. So what can you say are some of your main highlights of the past 2 decades?
So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Cage has been around, as you rightly mentioned, for 20 years. This month, we're celebrating our 20th year of existence. As you've rightly noted as well, that Cage came about because of the increase in violence, persecution, targeting towards Muslim minorities in the West, but in particular, the emergence of this class of prisoners that had no rights, no access to justice, tortured and humiliated and used as a sort of token of American victory and American might, and were hooded and shackled and taken to Guantanamo Bay and other black sites across the globe where they were tortured. So Cage emerged in that very dark context to point a finger and say that everyone deserves basic sets of rights and freedoms, irrespective of who they are, the color of their skin, or their beliefs. And at that point, funny enough, it was a very controversial position. People were told by President Bush at the time, that you're either with us or against us. So lining up against the prevalent narrative, or challenging the prevalent narrative that was being pushed by the US establishment and the broader Western establishment, was highly controversial at the time. But we've come to be vindicated over the years that Guantanamo was a stain on the American consciousness, and President Obama himself noted that it's something that needs to be shut down. Actually signed an executive decree to shut down Guantanamo Bay, but never did end up delivering on that promise. So that's the beginning of Cage. And I guess, as I just explained, the first sort of success of Cage was to be able to humanize and present pictures, images, names, stories of those men who were hooded and shackled and were paraded on the media as as the worst of the worst, giving them names, people like Mazambeg, like Tariq Dargul, like the Tipton Three Brothers, like Shakir Amar, Mansour al-Dhaifi, and so many others we've come to know who were in Guantanamo Bay, and actually exemplify the best of morals, ethics, values, and were people who were selfless in their sacrifice, and had no evil intentions towards anyone, and happened to be kind of picked up in the rage or zealousness of the kind of war on terror. So definitely Guantanamo Bay ranks up very high in terms of the successes of Cage. And throughout the years, we've seen how policies such as Prevent, which were put out essentially as a spying program, was exposed again over the years through concerted effort and through dedicated campaigning, such that now we know that Prevent has no scientific basis. This is again something that an exclusive report published by Cage. We know that the government was funneling cash into sometimes fake and sometimes manufacturing organizations in order to buy or manufacture legitimacy or consent for the Prevent program. We know that much of the training for Prevent was based on kind of racist or Islamophobic tropes. And this is again because of the campaigning and the organizing that Cage was leading against the Prevent policy. And we've taken considerable hits over the years. But right now we're in a position where last month, Amnesty International, the liberal human rights organization, has come out to say that Prevent needs to be abolished. So again, this is a major success for Cage, having kind of shifted the Overton window, as they say, on this issue. Again, you have other kind of matters such as arrest without charge or trial or citizenship deprivation. These cases mark some of the darkest periods of the early years of the war on terror, where men were arrested and held in British prisons without charge or trial for many years. Babar Ahmed is a particularly egregious example, having been the longest serving UK prisoner without charge or trial, just over 8 years that he spent in British prison without charge or trial. And those are some of the earlier cases that we campaigned on. And if you remember, Babar Ahmed, one of the successes of his case was that 140 or 150 odd thousand people signed a petition in his support, leading to one of the first debates in Parliament that was due to kind of public pressure to happen on his case, and the fact that he should be freed and not extradited to the United States. So I think over the years there's been many highlights, many successes. And these are just three that I thought would be good to make mention of.
Yeah, and you mentioned those are some of the highlights, and most of our listeners probably will remember those names. And you also spoke about Guantanamo Bay. This is, of course, a moral blight on the US. Despite Obama's effort, he failed to get that closed down, which I think is a moral blight on him as well and his presidency. Why he was unable to get Guantanamo Bay closed is shocking. But he has gone off the radar. So provide us with an update on the situation there. Are you still working on cases related to detainees in Guantanamo Bay? And what's the situation regarding that?
I mean, Guantanamo Bay is embedded into the DNA of Cage. It's something it's something we're very passionate about, something that's going to remain a central part of our work, so long as there are prisoners held there without charge or trial. So, from a set of prisoners nearly amounting to nearly 800 prisoners or so that were held in Guantanamo Bay, at the moment there are only around 30 that remain in Guantanamo. Amongst them are 2 Afghans, one who's a Afghan kind of native, and one brother who's an Afghan. He gained Afghan citizenship, who remain there, who we're working quite focused on those particular 2 cases. They're called Muhammad Rahim and Abdul Hadi Al-Iraqi. These are 2 kind of highlight cases that we're working on. We're working closely with their legal teams and have multiple meetings with them in order to kind of try and find a resolution for them, find a place where they can be resettled to and released to. Broadly speaking, we are in touch with all the other legal teams. I mean, one thing to make mention of, perhaps your viewers may not know, is that the brothers who are in Guantanamo Bay, they know Cage very well. And very often, legal teams from across the world will come to visit Cage in order to gain our support because their clients actually demand that go to Cage, they are the experts on this issue, and get their feedback, get their support, get their guidance on these issues. So these things, obviously, you can't always kind of promote it in the press, so on and so on, but they are happening every day. So Guantanamo Bay is still a key part of our work, and we continue to build relationship with the legal teams there and advocate for their causes. In fact, you might notice that we've employed one of the longest serving kind of prisoners in Guantanamo Bay, Mansour al-Daifi, who is based in Serbia. He's the head of our Guantanamo project, and he's doing phenomenal work in raising awareness about Guantanamo Bay, building partnerships, coalition, writing, commenting, and raising awareness about those prisoners who are still facing the kind of stigma and persecution as a result of their imprisonment in Guantanamo. So this work is definitely ongoing, and I don't see it stopping anytime soon, because the political will and the appetite to close Guantanamo Bay, unfortunately, even 20 years on, is still not there.
And one thing I've noticed because of your work, or we've noticed because of your work, is how much resistance there is from governments around the world, in Europe as well. Democracies don't like having their crimes being exposed, I would say as well. And as a result, a number of your staff have faced traveling bans, I would say, and they've not been allowed to go to meetings. What's the situation with that now? Are you still finding it difficult to do your work in Europe, to represent your clients in various capacity, in various providing legal counsel, and conducting your work in European legal centers? Is that still the case in the case of Cage?
So, contrary to popular belief, it's the vast majority of our staff travel quite freely and without issue. The problem that we've recently had, which is with our managing director in particular, and that's a very politicized sort of targeting of him. Due to him being the front of our kind of European expansion, if you want to put it that way. And in particular, the work we've done exposing the French persecution of Muslims. Over the last 3 or 4 years, Cage has produced reports, analysis, briefings, events and awareness and so on the situation of Muslims in France. Because Muslims in France, by and large, have been denied a voice. The organizations that have been representing them have been shut down, and those who still remain are under extreme pressure by the Home Office there, and the central government, and it's and the way how they operate what we term as the systematic obstruction policy, which is a sort of full total maximum policing type operation that seeks to restrict Muslim activism in any shape or form. So like Al Capone methods, if they can't get you because you've broken a law, then they'll find some sort of tax issue that may be used to close you down, or perhaps there might be a health and safety violation, or anything essentially just to stifle those organizations. So because of that, our managing director has faced some consequences and restrictions in his ability to travel to France, and most recently Poland and Switzerland. However, each of those countries don't have a particular problem with him per se. So it's the French government that is imposing its will on other smaller or lesser influential European nations, and it's something that we're taking quite seriously. And we've challenged this in the past and won and overturned it, and we're very confident that we'll be able to overturn it in the very near future, inshallah.
But it seems like you're already doing a lot of international work, working internationally, especially in cases like France, where you're challenging Islamophobia and producing reports on Islamophobia, state Islamophobia. So what's the thinking behind Cage International? You announced that this week that Cage is going global, is going international. So what's the thinking behind that?
Yeah, so as you rightly said, Cage has always been doing some sort of international work here or there. So Guantanamo Bay is in Cuba. You have the kind of black sites where the CIA used to torture Muslims. Those are all across the globe. A number of high-profile cases that we've operated on or supported are not based in the UK. However, those were individual kind of campaigns. Cage, 20 years on, we've recognized that there has to be a concerted effort to not only campaign on specific matters beyond the UK political space, but also to build capacity elsewhere. Because the challenge that we're facing as minorities, whether in the UK or in Europe, or even Muslim majorities elsewhere, is a very similar one. If you follow the trajectory of it, you find the same actors. They are able to organize on a global front, and we should also be able to globalize and pool in our expertise on a more international level and actually invest in building institutions that are able to organize that force. So that's the change that people will see with Cage. So when we say we're Cage International, it's more a statement of where we are at the moment, because this has been a gradual shift that we've been making over the last, I would say, the last 5 years. And at this moment, it was the right moment to say, you know what, it's time to go public and to announce that, yes, this is the direction that we'll be heading down, inshallah. And we've already had some success in being able to organize a cross-section of Muslim NGOs across Europe to attend the OSCE, which is the largest intergovernmental security conference on the globe, where we're able to confront representatives of various states on their abuses against Muslims. And we've done that for a few years consecutively. And there'll be multiple more efforts, inshallah, on this front, organizing Muslims across Europe and elsewhere, building capacity and making sure that our work is more interconnected, supporting one another.
So before I get to your work on Palestine, based on what you said, the question that comes to mind is, will you also be working in the Muslim countries, defending victims of war on terror? Because as we know, a lot of these authoritarian regimes in the Middle East have embraced the war on terror narrative, and they are targeting Muslims there as well. But we saw how challenging it's been for you to work within democracies in Europe, that there's not much space for you to work within. So do you expect to be able to conduct cases, represent clients in the Middle East as well, where there are less room for civil organization, civil groups and legal groups like yourself?
I mean, obviously, there are certain countries which should be quite impossible to work on. Whilst in others, there's opportunities. We've supported clients, for example, in Qatar. We've supported clients in Turkey. We've supported clients in Bangladesh. We have contact with families in Afghanistan. There are some issues through partnerships and supporting Pakistan and in India. So there is a scope where Cage can lend its expertise, its knowledge, its ability to coordinate, to campaign to others. And fundamentally, the international scope of Cage is, and I've said it a few times now, it's more about capacity building and creating opportunities. We find ourselves very often people coming to our doors because, as you said, the war on terror has evolved, but fundamentally, a lot of the oppression that Muslims are facing is rooted in the language, the policies, the discourse of the war on terror. It might have evolved slightly because the war on terror right now, as a term, has become slightly archaic, but it's still very much alive in our day-to-day life and laws and so on. So the organization continue to come to Cage because of that experience. And I think the shift that we're making is to say, yes, I think we are at a position where we can be that experienced voice, that hub for other Muslims to come to learn, to develop, and to train.
And as I mentioned, you've been doing a lot of work on Palestine recently. I think last year you took the decision by the US Education Secretary Gavin Williamson to demanding universities and schools and colleges adopt the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, cracking down on pro-Palestinian activism. So you've been doing a lot of work on that, and just this week you published a report, which is quite a chilling report, which shows us there's been something like 455 increase in the cases you're dealing with, censoring Palestine from schools to workplaces. So what are the key highlights of that report that you published this week?
So that report is called the Censoring Palestine from Schools to Workplaces. It's a summary and analysis of our casework over the last 2 months. So since the attack, genocidal onslaught on Gaza began 2 months ago, we've seen how solidarity for Gaza, solidarity for Palestine, has been interpreted as being extremism, sort of radicalism, sort of a risk, being treated through a counter-terrorism lens, a policing lens, being penalized in schools where expressions of solidarity being banned. So it's created a lot of problems, and a lot of this is rooted in the Islamophobia and in Islamophobic policies underlined by kind of war on terror legacy laws. So over that period, we've dealt with in excess of 200 cases. About 97 or 98% of those cases involve Muslims. We've seen how PREVENT has been weaponized. So throughout our cases, we've seen how PREVENT has been weaponized in order to suppress support for Palestine, parents and children being threatened to be referred to PREVENT, the Muslim spying or counter-extremism program, if you want to put it that way. We've seen how children are literally bullied by their school to remove symbols of Palestine from their clothing, even on non-uniform days, asking them to Palestinian kids literally to remove the shirt stating that they're Palestinian, and that they're proud. We've noticed how there's been criminal investigations, immediate suspensions from work and terminations of contract, gross kind of misinterpretation or misquotation of statements by our imams in the masajid and khutbahs, and charity commission investigations to kind of put pressure, regulatory pressure on Muslim charities and masajid. And again, how anti-terrorism powers being used to silence people at protest. It's all symptomatic of a sort of full spectrum assault on the right to stand for Palestine, to support Palestine, instigated by right-wing media interests, politicians, lobby groups, and the likes. And we're seeing a sort of undercutting assault on the freedom of expression of Muslims in the UK and anyone who is pro-Palestine. So these are some of the key learnings that the report has come up with. So it's quite a concerning read. But on the flip side, through the cases that we've dealt with, the vast majority we've managed to come to some sort of resolutions of those cases. And a good number of those cases, there's been actually a reversal of these sort of anti-Palestine Islamophobic policies, and even apologies secured. You may see how there was a particular school in Halifax, which we supported parents there, and following banning essentially items of clothing that are related to Palestine, they actually came round to apologize to the community, apologize to the child that was involved, reverse their policies, actually set up fundraisers for Palestine, and commit themselves to developing their cultural understanding of these issues. So I think there are definitely some highlights and some wins, and it shows that the community is coming together and rallying support. People aren't left to walk alone. Parents are becoming more active in their children's education, and these are positive outcomes that has come from all of this.
And we just heard this week there was a case in East London where a boy was allegedly bullied by the schools for wearing a Palestinian flag on his jacket. So that work is needed more than anything else. So on that, just one final question. So how difficult has it been? I mean, you've got 200 examples, individuals you guys are representing. So how difficult has it been navigating through the legal challenges? Do you find this easier? I mean, if you challenge those cases, is it more likely that there is a chance that you will defeat or win and reverse the allegation? What's been your experience?
It's been a mixed bag, it must be said. I mean, the political atmosphere, you have a government has created a hostile environment towards Palestine, and they've legitimized or they've given the green light for certain head teachers of particular agendas, or people or bosses in workplaces who have a particular bias or prejudice against Palestinians or Palestine more generally, to act upon those prejudices and to discriminate against pupils or colleagues and employees in those settings. So a lot of the time it's been quite hard and laborious work, reviewing policy papers, reviewing guidelines, it's liaising with employment lawyers and so on. So it's been quite it's quite difficult to manage these cases, but at the same time, people have shown a willingness to challenge. They've been shown a willingness to stand up for Palestine and be counted, and have shown a willingness to not be silent when there is an actual genocide taking place against their brothers and sisters. And this is all quite reassuring for the position that we're in as the community more broadly.
Yeah, and thank you so much for joining us. I think you've given us a really good historical review of where it started from and what it's been up to and the work you guys are doing. And I'm sure you will continue to be doing that work, especially now with so much that's going on in Palestine. So I want to thank you again for joining us, and those who have tuned in from wherever you may be to this show, and speak to you soon in another conversation with the Middle East Monitor. Bye-bye.